Hello everyone and welcome to this video where we're going to be talking about 5 tips for success when starting to play Stormworks, so follow along. Now before I begin, I do want to have a little bit of a kind of forward, which is to say that this is whether or not you're an experienced player or if you're someone who is beginning in Stormworks, or maybe you're finding that a lot of times you're getting overwhelmed with what Stormworks has to offer, so this is for you. So the reason we're on this little boat is step number 1. Learn the gameplay and understand how you can utilize the gameplay when building your creations. So in this case, you see it's very stormy, so you have to build something that can withstand waves such as the ones you're seeing here. Maybe your interest lies in something like the oil drilling or mining. So take the time to actually understand these different aspects of the game before rushing in to try to build something. Obviously you can tinker around, I'm not saying you can't, but the best creations come when you understand exactly what the scope is and what's determined. So for the example of this little boat, even though we flipped over just now, it still righted itself. So this is a little rescue boat, and even though I've set the wind to maximum, I know we're not too far from land, but look how big these storms are, or how big the waves are. It's still relatively stable and keeps going. So this is intended for rescue missions. Maybe your interest lies with underwater exploration, so really then take the time to understand what the best kind of creation is for what you're trying to go for. So take the time to learn the gameplay, learn how you can best make your creations suited to what you're trying to do. Tip number 2 is when you're ready to build, start first with tinkering, with making test creations like this, experimenting with the bodies, experimenting with how things work, and then implementing them on your big ship or big creation. So what you're looking at here is the test base that I created for my position hold. It's a 3-dimensional position hold using the little GPS sensors, and then I implemented it in my ships where you can actually press a button and it'll hold itself. And in addition to this craft allows you to sort of use the rotate, like you can berth and dock using the different thrusters on the side. So that's the purpose of this one. And here when I just search test, look at all the tests that I have currently that are just kind of proving that certain ideas I have work, how good they work, before I go ahead and throw it into my creation. Sometimes they're as simple as just a trip computer, and I just put it on an existing creation like this just to test out how it works. And sometimes they're as complex as this, where I have added a full other engine to see how well it handles. Actually 2 extra engines on either side. So normally here we have our 5 engines, now it actually has 7. So I went and did a speed test to see the fuel efficiency versus how much speed we actually get out of something like this. So point is, try to make test experiments and things like that when you're doing something big, to just break down the complexity of the task at hand. Obviously, like I said before, you can't start with something this big, you gotta play it one piece at a time. So this mini sub is a creation in itself. The diving bell is a creation in itself. Same with the shark cage. So all these things, obviously the helicopter and the boat in the back, all these things were experiments or tests that were then added to this creation. So play around and make tests, I guess, that will help you with the big project. So now maybe you're ready to start building a big creation. So what I recommend you do is follow tip number 3, which is when you want to build something, a full creation, a big creation, you're going to follow a tutorial on YouTube, you're going to follow an example from the workshop and learn from it. So in the case of tutorials, even I have some very beginner series, but I know Mr. NJ has tons, as well as other YouTube content creators. So you can utilize that to learn how to make individual systems. I know Mr. NJ has a good video for making a ballast system. So whether you use his or whether you use his as a starting point to then develop your own, which is what I did actually when I wasn't very knowledgeable about Stormworks, I used different systems in place to try to create stuff that I could actually use in my creations. So things like the ballast systems, even the little helicopters and things, the stability controls, all that stuff was, I didn't develop it from scratch. I didn't invent the wheel. I went, watched some videos, and then either used it and put a link in my description, or I went ahead and developed something based off it. So it's pretty critical. I mean, a big creation is going to have tons of microcontrollers. I'm sure all of you know how daunting it is to press the logic and then seeing all this, and not to mention the composite and all the different ones. But there is method to the madness, if you will, and when you take one step at a time, you can find a way to sort this out. You can find a way to apply the right microcontrollers if you just focus on one system at a time, learn it, whether from YouTube, whether from another creation, and go from there. So that is tip number 3. Tip number 4 is also the same thing about not inventing the wheel, and it's about finding an example of a creation that's already in existence and then reverse engineering from it or learning from it. So all these presets are there for you to learn, is what I found. So you can open up this modular engine controller and find how to make a very basic modular engine. You could then start by making your own. So you put your radiator and etc. You learn and add parts until you have something that you can work with. Likewise, the tractor, the starter boat, all this stuff. Now these are fairly basic creations, but at that point you can also go to your workshop and subscribe to all sorts of things which you then can learn from. For example, when I first started Stormworks a couple of years ago now, I had several creations that were inspiring me to sort of build all sorts of things. So I subscribed to them and I studied them and learned. So I opened up things like this and I was like, all right, I like this shape. How can I make this bow shape on my ships? Or I'd open up another one and it had a really good system for stability, for example. And then I was like, all right, I want to try to use this in making something that I could work with on my ships, right? So you don't have to invent the wheel. Sometimes it's good enough just to get ideas from others, and sometimes they're amazing ideas, and maybe you can't exactly recreate it. It's possible that they've perfected it, and if you don't want to take it and give them credit and ask for permission, all that stuff, you then can make a simplified version of that rather than taking theirs. But there's always an option to learn. It just takes a little bit of dedication. You have to put the time forth to actually sit and understand what it is you're looking at. So there is a learning curve, but in the end you'll be able to make things that are amazing, that you could use, that you're proud of, and all that good stuff. So I do recommend learning from others as you do in the real world. Engineering, you don't go and learn everything in university. You have to learn from people that are more experienced than you. That applies to any kind of work you have where you have to go and understand. So yeah, that's always a good thing. See, even this one, when I first made my first Sea-Doo, this one here was my starting basis, and from there I was able to develop and create my own. So it's a different shape, different orientation, different microcontrollers. You could argue that one looks better, it's a little more pointier in the front, mine's a little more compact, but point is they both do the same trick and they both get the job done, in my opinion. So it is a good idea to learn at least by doing it that way. And lastly, number 5, don't worry about the little things, but focus on the big picture, and the little things will fall into place as you work. And of course you may fail, but that's just how you learn. You can learn that way, and you will persevere, and you'll only get better and better. So I will show you this dealership that I'm currently working on. It's still a work in progress, but there's, like, when I first started it, I was like, all right, this is a pretty daunting task, you know, and I had to build something simple like this, but it's still an engine lift. So I'm like, all right, I got to build an engine lift, I got to build the engine stand, tire storage, like all this little stuff, but it doesn't help or benefit you at all to worry about the little things. I mean, you could spend all day perfecting this wall of parts, for example, but that's not gonna finish the creation, let's say, or make your creation worthy or whatever. So sometimes it's just as simple as starting with the big picture, making your way down, building the overall shape, building the systems inside, and eventually you'll get to a part or a point when now you're focusing on how to aim that light. Now you're focusing on the decor. Now you're focusing on little things, but you're no longer having to think about the big thing. So even here, I'm not really worrying about the roof yet. You just give yourself certain stages to develop and focus on them. Now I will be making another video, how to prevent scope creep, how to prevent overwhelming yourself. I will make videos and other tips as well as the beginner series, intermediate series, and maybe even an advanced series of tutorials. I'll be showing how to make a simple vehicle, a simple helicopter, a simple submarine, airplane, all that stuff. I have a lot of things planned, but make a comment below if you want other sort of advice videos or tip videos. But in the meantime, I do have a lot planned, and I will for sure be releasing content. I have cars planned. If you go over here to the garage area, this one's going to be released fairly soon here, as well as the actual dealership. I'm just finishing up some missions for it. I want to have missions where you can actually learn how to fix a car, so I'm doing that. And yeah, as always, stay tuned for more, and as always, happy Stormworksing, everyone. Take care.